Well, good evening. Let me share this with some other folks. Hopefully you can hear me okay. I did test the microphone. I know I make that mistake sometimes of not plugging in or something like that. Try to be better in that regard. Pop out the chat. And share this with a few people on Facebook. And Twitter X. I'm not going to talk for that long because I want to try to get right with it. There's always a lot to say. But I named this Beyond Human ETs, capitalized, versus former elementary ETs in small letters, phonies, and their human pawns. And if somebody wants to hear the real goods, on this subject in particular of ETs, then I suggest you go to the heavensgate.com website and examine the 95 statement by an ET presently incarnate, which was written by Doe in 1995, after I had left the group. And he wrote that in particular. It's got like 21, 22 statements in there. It's not that long. And if you would look at those statements and not fear believing in them, then you'll get a whole lot out of it, even repeatedly, that will inform you to some degree better than you're probably going to get informed by any human source, because they're beyond human, evidenced of many ways, evidenced in many ways that I could spend all day talking about. So, let's see. I haven't heard myself being played back yet. Oh. Let me see if it's the sound check. Is anybody... let's see. I haven't heard myself being played back. Okay, I guess it is working okay. I don't know, I'm supposed to keep that off. Let me see if it's the sound check. Is anybody... Right, so I want to keep that on. Anyway, so Um, it looks like it's working okay. But if there's anybody in the chat, let me know. Okay. So I'm just going to kind of read this statement that I wrote. And if you have any questions, anybody that tunes into this, say something in the chat and I'll try to address it. But this was stimulated to me by watching Jimmy Dore, as I regularly do, and him talking to two individuals about these events that took place, to where the head of the Maritime combat force in the Middle East and Iran, the General or Admiral, whatever his title is for the Maritime, and also the head of the Air Force Command, the chiefs of those combat operations, both expressed that they weren't going along with the war in Iran that is being generated by the President of the United States. I'm kind of limiting some of my talk about him because I don't know what kind of control they will try to put on people. It looks like at this point, well, to me, it's basically what we're seeing in reality, as I understand it, and believe to be true from both the teachings of T and Do over 22 years that was left behind for us to examine now, that I received 19 years of in person, and everything we experienced in the 90s or the late 80s and the 90s in relationship to a lot of investigation of the whole so-called UFO phenomena or the space alien phenomena, examining all the things that were being reported then and had been written about what took place, and that the whistleblowers came forward and said things about, and books were written about, and that is, it does have misinformation seeded within it, but by and large is accurate to where let me describe this in some of those words. That in the early 1970s, he described himself and T as two individuals, task partners, from what he called the evolutionary level above human, which was synonymous with the old terminology, the archaic terminology, and less accurate terminology called the kingdom of heaven. The most accurate part about that, the kingdom, is because it was illustrated as a many-membered kingdom with individuals that were elders to other individuals, older members and younger members. That's why that illustration was given at a time when humans didn't have really that much technical understanding of evolutionary processes among life forms. Anyway, so that's why it's not as accurate, because there is a type of evolution of mind and physicality in terms of, even though mind has a plasma-like physicality, it's a state of matter that humans don't understand much about. And the next level has limited humans in that regard by not giving them certain keys to how they can communicate with humans, even the next level, through radio waves that are not on the bands that humans know about. Even though humans are learning some things about that, and the way that the mind can be able to project its view of things that, to stimulate like connection to being able to view something like the Farsight organization, remote viewing they call it. It's not. I don't know if I lost the signal, because my okay, it looks like I'm still going. Oh, now it's breaking up again. Alright, I'm going to have to take down this other operation that I've been running, and that made it so that it works now. So alright. Oh wow, I didn't know I put that there. That's strange. Okay, I don't mind that though, actually. Seeing that there. Huh. So I didn't even intend it, and it showed up. So I'm going to leave it there to be part of my screen for the moment. This statement. But, so Noah was saying that they moved into their minds, moved into and took over two human bodies. And that's where the term incarnation comes from. It means in the flesh. In other words, they are actually plasma-like minds that have grown to be a force, to be a very strong force, and exists through whatever physical suit of clothing they are choosing to wear, to put on, to be in, to use, which can even be a spacecraft itself, a physical spacecraft made out of gemstones or whatever. Okay, just to give you an example of something that's concrete that they could be made out of, and other alloys of metals and things that humans only got some evidence of in some of the crashes, of being very strong but yet flexible and couldn't be broken or burned or bent or but yet they were very lightweight substances. So that's where humans first got, well, maybe not the very first, but as far as the documentation, got the idea of trying to make alloys with metals of, so, and humans can pull on that when they know it exists, especially. If they don't know something exists, then they really can't tap into that part of the mind around the planet that exists. And also that would include tap into the minds of deceased humans that exist, that had relationships even in societies, in even past civilizations on the earth that had all kinds of technical abilities. And so the space aliens are those. They're the former elementary members of the evolutionary level above human, the next level above human. The next level because in the human kingdom, there's evolutionary levels starting with the mineral kingdom, and then the plant kingdom, and then the animal kingdom, and then the human kingdom is the fourth kingdom level on earth. And from the human kingdom can be born members of the evolutionary level above human. That's why we need our physical bodies in order to learn the lessons that can only be learned by a mind choosing to take over a physical body. And what that looks like, one example of what that looks like is, let's say you have a severe addiction to a substance, like alcohol or different kinds of drugs. And you decide that you don't want to do that anymore. And so you're exercising your control over your vehicle, because the vehicle just wants to do what it makes it happy. And so we all get lessons in a lot of regards, especially when it comes to our health and our appearance, and to do and not do other things, do different things differently. That requires telling the vehicle, no, you're not going to do that anymore, or you're only going to do that certain times. You're not going to do that as much as you used to do it, because I don't think it's good for you. That's taking over a vehicle in that regard. But there's lots of ways to take over a vehicle. And that's all part of the program that the next level built. That's a metamorphic program. So let me continue though. In other words, the vehicles are designed. I'm going to take this as a sign of needing to shift from the topic that I had first on the screen to more from this document. Because what Doe is talking about is saying that we call these bodies vehicles, for they are simply the bodies that he and his partner, his task partner, took, which was T, the name T, the name that T chose, and Doe chose the name that Doe chose. I don't know how they exactly arrived at those names. But they took two bodies that were in their 40s at the time, in age, because they wanted those bodies to have enough experience in the human kingdom so that they could demonstrate all the things and their equivalents that students would be deciding were things to either do with the vehicle or not do with the vehicle. In other words, not be stimulated by substances too much, or by by opening up our minds to there being a family of minds, as opposed to, not opposed to, but as opposed to a family of vehicles, a family of humans which isn't a bad family. It's not a bad family, but a lot of people, maybe some people, maybe not a lot all the time, they don't find that they have things in common with those that they grew up with. Whether that was a traditional mother and father or less traditional caregivers or step parents, and whatever people were raised with, that they don't get along with them. They don't necessarily see eye to eye. They don't believe the things that they believe. They don't put the importance on things that the new human beings that are growing, put on things. So they don't necessarily want to repeat what their caregivers taught them or gave them or provided for them, and all of the ramifications of that. And they break away from it, and that's also an indication of a mind that is outgrowing that attachment to human behaviors and ways, even though there's nothing wrong with those behaviors and ways. And the time to totally detach from those behaviors and ways is still among us to choose based on all the things that T and Doe and crew left behind in information to help describe what behaviors and ways were not consistent with the behaviors and ways of members of the next level. It's clinical. We're talking about clinicalness. In other words, they don't reproduce, so they don't have any sex. They don't form attachments to one another. Their only attachment is to their older member that birthed them into the next level. And it's through that attachment of minds that they have experience with all other kinds of members of the next level, and they love each other. But they don't love each other in physical ways, except that their bodies treat each other well, kindly, and the bodies don't have a separate mind like human bodies do. So human bodies have a mind that was developed because of the influence of the ancestral mind, the genetic mind, and the influence, that's within the sperm and egg cells, and with that, when the conception happens, with that new combination that then stays with the baby automatically, and has a lot of time-released kinds of behaviors and ways that can be stimulated through the growth of that baby. And then in combination with the experiences that that individual has in growing up, that teaches them things that they like and teaches them things that they don't like, and teaches them, what to move towards and what not to move towards. And during that process, all human beings, from my understanding, and I believe it to be true, and it makes sense to me that it's true, and I have had some experience with it personally, so that I'm not just going by a belief and a believed experience, that those invisibles influence us and become part of us. They become our little entourage. Entourage might be just one other individual or spirit, but most likely there's a number of spirits that like to use our vehicles. And we can find a lot of happiness and satisfaction in being and doing the things that make us happy. There's nothing wrong with that. But there's some of those influences are also gonna, when they influence us, like let's say somebody died and they were playing the piano a lot for fun, okay, or if even their business. And so they died, and if they don't have a piano player in the family unit that they were attaching to by their own choices, or from the local community, if they don't find a budding piano player or a successful one to be with, in order to experience the satisfaction that they got mentally, which is a real thing. It's a real satisfaction to be mentally happy, right? So a deceased spirit mind from a piano player then would attach themselves to those that were playing the piano. And they might learn that they can be attached to a number of different vehicles that are playing piano, and even help them become a better piano player. And you can say that about pretty much everything in the human kingdom. There are spirits that help us even to walk. And that's why you see people that get crippled, they can learn to walk again. It's not only about severing of nerves, because the mind, in some cases, can rebuild the circuitry to get around certain things. and the next level can help people with that too. And of course, humans, through their sciences, can help people with that sometimes too. And also with knowing how to do it by learning to exercise and, willing your body to move in ways that it was incapacitated to do before, and keep staying with it, and eventually getting the toe to wiggle. And, we've heard like stories like that, right? So it shows that the body is far more intricate than humans have ever conceived, because humans don't really understand the mind that well and the power of the mind. And there is a magnetism to the mind. So I'm going to move on, so the vehicles that T and Doe described as Doe described as he and T taking, were to be used as tools. And he calls them plants that were given a tag. They were tagged and set aside for their use from birth. In the case of T and Doe, the late 20s and early 30s. But a late, I'm not going to go through qualifying that, but there's more to think about in terms of those dates. But for the sake of brevity, I want to move on to the next part of what Doe is describing, where he's saying that they brought to Earth with them a crew of students whom they had worked with and nurtured on Earth in previous missions. They were in varied stages of metamorphic transition. We're talking about literal metamorphosis, like we see in like a caterpillar-butterfly relationship, to where the old creature that has less facility to travel and move about and be, with having new experiences, comes from the changes that take place when that caterpillar gets the signal to try to become a butterfly, and they don't all succeed in that. And what type of butterfly they become, and how well they live and thrive, is also part of it. And with the next level, to become a butterfly or a member of the next level requires a mind that can manipulate matter, can direct matter, can direct energy, can focus their energy. And that by doing that, they're exercising an actual organ in the body that's built into the body, but is only stimulated when we conquer our addictions. And some addictions are harder to conquer than others. The sense of power and being something special might be among the biggest addictions. When we think that we are all powerful, even though it's true in the context that we have, being humans and being nurtured by the next level, we all have the capacity to become members of the next level at some point. It might take a number of experiences in the human or a human equivalent circumstance. And that the task that's given is always to get the information out from the older members and spread it so that other humans have the benefit of those older members being in physical bodies, interfacing with people, and yet to look at them, doesn't look like they have anything more or less than anybody else, or if they do, it's thought of as a talent or a skill, or but if they don't make money, if they don't use it to become famous or make money or to build an organization that then keeps on growing and growing and growing, and then doing human things or even space alien things like the Raelians did with or are doing with cloning technology and things like that. So if they're not doing that, if these individuals that take over human vehicles don't act like humans, then people don't even tune into them at all, and they think that they're totally off their rockers, and that they led people to their demise, which is thought about by many people in the human kingdom as happening with Tiando's influence on the student body, which I know as a witness was totally wrong, totally off track. Even though they required our all, they didn't tell us how to do that. They didn't tell us how to give our all. I mean, they did, but they didn't make us do it. We weren't forced into doing anything. We were allowed to be in the classroom without revealing anything that was on our minds, even though they put into effect mechanisms so that we would reveal the things that were on our minds. And so, picture this experience. You join a group, and now you're put with somebody as a partner that you're going to be with 24/7, but you're not going to be sleeping with, except maybe in the same tent, but not like as a a sexual partner, and you're not going to be treating any differently than anybody else, even though you're going to have your pre-programmed ways of looking at that other individual. Like if the vehicle is attracted, like for my vehicle, if I'm essentially mostly attracted to female vehicles, then any female vehicle basically is going to provide some degree of attraction, potentially, unless they have overcome or conquered their addiction to gender consciousness, which I don't know if it's right to call that an addiction, because it might not be really in that category, but it's a consciousness that members of the next level don't have. They don't have a gender. They don't reproduce. New members come into their laboratories on spacecrafts that can be as big as a planet, that we can't see what's going on in that thing that we see in the sky through our telescopes, and shows some of what it's made out of, through the spectrographs and things like that. But we don't know what's going on there. Maybe nothing. Maybe we get little hints of things, which we do. But that's the way it is with all this that's happening around us. We are very, 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 very in the dark. And if we think we're not, it shows how much we are. And we get a little glimmer of light that goes a long ways in the human kingdom. Because that little glimmer of light is not just a representation of the next level as being light beings, because they are light beings. Their minds have grown to produce energy that is enlightening to people that are around them, if those people can tune into them, or if those people, if they can tune into them, because they have to be able to tune into their minds, so they have to know a little bit about how they think in order to tune into, literally by frequencies, tune into their radio signals, in order to not only hear their words, but better and better understand the meaning behind those words and the depth behind those words. Now, the space aliens are mimicking that. And you see that with a lot of the people that become leaders of the religious communities and even atheistic communities, because atheism is a good step away from the religious communities. But spirituality is also, in the New Age format or in the discarnate, like ghost beliefs format, is something that many people who leave the religion behind and don't necessarily are still open-minded to growth of the mind and the actual operations that thought forms have on humans, influencing humans in certain ways, or reading somebody's mind, or having extrasensory perceptions of what somebody's going to say or do, even from great distances, in the human kingdom. They can actually get a sense that somebody's in danger, that they've become very close to. They can have a sense of somebody's health having a problem, that they've been very close to, even though physically they are not in the same area at all. I've had all those experiences and many more. And I'm the tip of the iceberg in terms of what some people have experienced in terms of the unseen frequency world, or what you could call the spirit world, the world of mind, because the word spirit really is an archaic word. The only reason we use it is because it relates to the past understanding, the way that that word was used, even though the past understanding in the record books, they all have, a lot of the records have certain degrees of flaw to them. But that doesn't mean they're all bad, they're all wrong, they're all inaccurate. It just means that we don't have the most accurate view of reality that we end up gaining as a society through the development of technology, to where we knew that, when you look at an object, it's not just what you see with your eyes, because your eyes aren't capable of seeing the cells in that, or the particle interfaces that are happening within those. It's like things get degraded by the sun. Over time, they look differently. Everything is in a constant state of change. Just depends on, as far as we know, but it depends on the elements that they're subject to and what kind of elements they are made from. And, what humans put in their bodies and breathe and drink and think is actually a big part of it too. What they believe in, all can have its value, but it doesn't mean that just believing in something automatically becomes useful for solving certain problems. And that's why Tiendo gave us meditations to do, to where our mind was actually thinking that it was interfacing with their mind, to bring it into the top of our heads in a relaxed condition with our eyes open or closed, whatever is best for, and envisioning something coming through the top of our head, not something, but their mind, the light, just thinking of it as light, coming in and then healing all the cells of the head and the brain and the pineal gland and of any of infirmities of thinking, infirmities of, which infirmities of thinking would be not seeing something as well for what it is, as opposed to having no understanding of what it is, or having limited understandings of what it is, which we will always have somewhat of a limited understanding, because everything has greater understandings associated with it. I think in a general sense that's true. I'm not saying that's an absolute, though, because that's one of the things that we can't determine in the human kingdom, of what is an absolute understanding. Because even members of the next level don't claim to have an absolute understanding. They're always seeking a higher way to do things, a better way to do things, a more, a closer way of doing things the way that their older members would do it is the real key. And that's what Tiendo were teaching the students. And they were saying that if you want to be our students, then we want your undivided attention. Why? Because they wanted to dominate us? No, not at all. It was actually more work for them to have more students, because they literally would be asking their older members in their in their time how to help a student. And that asking for help is a desperation to receive the help to give to those students so that those students can accomplish what the students say they want to do. And we had to, in the classroom, prove to Tiendo that we wanted to do it. And if we were rebellious in any way, shape, or form, then they thought, well, here's the solution to that. If you want to use it, then use it. If you don't want to use it, then maybe this isn't the place for you to stay. And they even paid us, not they, but Doe offered us $2,000 to leave the classroom in the 1990s, the early 1990s. I think it was. I might have that wrong. It might have been late 1980s when he first brought that up. And some were given money. I was given money. I was given $600 and a plane ticket to where I agreed to go, decided to go. Actually, I brought it up as a, I didn't remember it correctly. Anyway, but I was in a confused state at the time when I left the group. I wasn't disbelieving anything except to the degree that I guess I didn't believe in the solutions to what I was dealing with that Doe had offered me to do a different task that had more responsibility that I once had. Anyway, but which I could have chose to stay in the class and do that task and maybe overcome the other things that I was not recognizing required my focus in order to develop my mind, my literal mind, to be strong enough, the muscle of the mind, to be strong enough to actually be a mind that could control a vehicle that has no energy source in that way to control. See, the human vehicle, when it takes in fuel and gets enough sleep and water and sunlight, when it has those things, enough of those things, it can operate for a lifetime. It might be a short lifetime, it might be a long lifetime, it might be, the mind can develop through whatever lifetimes. It could be an extremely difficult lifetime to be in a vehicle that's born with a disease. Okay? But they can grow so much from that experience that the next level can say, okay, well, we're going to continue to give you opportunities to develop in the human kingdom and then beyond the human kingdom. And the next level knows how to manage and monitor that growth of spirit in the human kingdom, because the human kingdom then is a school. It's a school for all human minds, spirits that exist in the human kingdom that are nurtured by coming through vehicles. In other words, the flesh itself is generating the development of mind, the building of mind. And so the more and more we build our minds with the most accurate mind that exists in the human kingdom, even though that we don't necessarily know that's what it is, the more and more we recognize the reality of the next levels above human society. as being the creators of the earth and the life forms on it by technological development of the systems and the materials on earth. And then beyond. Doesn't end. Next level members have some strata of next level bodies that are grown on a vine, sort of, for the sake of understanding, like grown, as opposed to like a pumpkin is grown, right? But a member of the next level's body that's grown, it's grown to adulthood. It doesn't start off as a little pumpkin. It's grown to adult. It's made. That's why it's said as created. It's made from, the vehicle is actually made, but in a grown way of making it, not by soldering irons and a torch and it's biological development. And humans have been, working with that a lot. That's one of the things that humans want money to do. They want to keep their research going because they want to find a way to actually build organs. And so, yeah, they want baby. I'm not agreeing with this, but they want the organs from living babies because then they're the most pure they're going to be in terms of the content of the blood in those organs, and so they can examine them and try to figure out how to manufacture those same ingredients, or learn to splice them with others, or learn to make skin grafts, artificial skin that could actually grow over a wound, so that like was burned or something, they're trying to learn all those things, and those things aren't bad to learn. But what happens a lot of times is that they justify then looking at human life as part of their experiment. And so then they'll make a disease worse than it was going to be, and the response to it worse than it needed to be, in order to use humans to accept their medication that they are hoping will solve all human problems with viruses and things. And so they on purpose will tell humans that not to use vitamin C, for instance, to solve their viral problem. When people that have been using vitamins for things, and like vitamin C in particular, knew from their own experiences could help lessen a cold or even get rid of it altogether, so that you wouldn't need to have more serious medications as long as you kept your immune system operating, so that the vitamin C had a chance to cleanse out whatever toxins are in the system. But the immune system gets bogged down with trying to get rid of an abundance of mucus-forming foods that it sees as mucking up the system, literally, like gluing up, like bread products do that. They actually turn to glue in our bodies. They don't necessarily fully digest, because the vehicles are only able to digest a certain amount of it so fast. And if the immune system, if the pancreas and the gallbladder and the other organs that produce the enzymes to digest different foods and things, and combat, white cells being made by the immune system to combat viruses and things, if they're all being overworked, then they just don't get to it all. And you have tumors grow, and all kinds of things happen, skin rashes, and as those toxins are some of the cells that are working are trying to get rid of those toxins any way it can. And so, like being on the transfiguration diet that Doe left for us to have as a healing type of diet, that is no longer, that they sold to somebody else who's keeping it going through David Christopher's work with the Natural Healing Health Institute. Is that what it's called? The Center for Natural Healing, or the Institute for Natural Healing? I keep on getting the name of it wrong. But anyway, so I'm just going all over the place, but that's what I do. Anybody who knows me if you're new to this stream, knows that I'm going to go all over the place. But I don't think it's a bad thing to do that. Even though I can go too far in one direction or another and get off the track. But so I'm going to get back to this, what Doe was talking about in this document he wrote. Anyway, so he says that he and T not only tagged and began to work with the physical bodies that humans know of as Marshall Applewhite and Bonnie Nettles, but also brought other, let me just say, young or student or elementary level members of the next level to go through another operation in the Earth Kingdom so that they could further conquer and develop their minds through the conquering of their human addictions, including addiction to being human. And, reproducing and is part of that. Which doesn't mean it's wrong to reproduce. And certainly when we reproduce, T and Doe felt like we were responsible for a time of helping that vehicle grow so that it can be an adult on its own. It wasn't meant to be that the parent of a new human vehicle was responsible for that new being for their entire life, and it wasn't part of the next level's mind to also for the child, when it grows up to be an adult or whatever, to be responsible to take care of their parents or caregivers or elders. Except that that would be what, next level members, or they would, there's a value to showing appreciation for what parents go through in order to help their children develop into adults. And so treating one another in the ways that we want to be treated, that was even more updated guidelines for becoming more like members of the next level. Because members of the next level don't fight, they don't have wars, they don't, if they feel like it's time for a certain recycling of what became toxic into something that could be healthy again. When an entity becomes so self-centered that they think that other like that people in the military are like their cannon fodder, for example. I think I was having this thought the other day. I mean, literally yesterday and the day before that, I think. Or maybe even because I began to think about when I heard the report that it's like people in the Secret Service didn't really know what to do in certain circumstances when there was a shooting, and so they looked like they were befuddled and puzzled, and I think the same thing is happening from the lack of having to deal with too much of that, of those very difficult circumstances of being around somebody that's generating violence that could even kill you. You know, people second think again, you know, where their loyalty is to somebody, right? And I kept on thinking that, you know, there were going to be people that are going to not want to go along with this war, any of the wars, even though they've signed up to be in the military. And some of them are just hoping that they're not going to be deployed. And some of them, when they're deployed, are just hoping that they can deal with it and it won't be too terrible. And some it is very terrible for, as it should be. And they tough it out and they leave, and then they have PTSD a lot of times, and they suffer immensely. And some of them are still able to turn their vehicle around to where they can still learn lessons instead of being depressed or drugged or, you know, all the time, or a threat to other people because of erratic behaviors that they have from their war experiences, which is understandable to have those. And sometimes when they choose to leave, it's not necessarily a bad thing. But that's, you know, that's not encouraged, because to me, asking the next level for help, the highest source they can reach is the next level can help them. But even if they do, the next level allows them to leave, the next level can take that spirit and give them a new task. And the tasks can get harder. So that even people that are dying in the military or are victims of somebody else doesn't mean that they're lost. Doesn't mean that they're bad. Like some of the religionists are teaching that, oh, well, if a hurricane wipes out that town and 10 people die from it, that means those 10 people were evil, or that town was evil. And we don't know. That the next level may be actually stimulating difficulty using weather patterns to help people from growing up and being stagnated, not looking for more, looking for more goodness, and trying to act towards others with more goodness. And I'm not saying I'm a great example of this, but knowing about it is part of it. You know, I'm not the one that decides whether, you know, somebody that wants to, well, I mean, helping people in all shapes and forms is a form of goodness. Now you can have a job that is to help people, and you may be helping people, and that's all fine and well. That's all a good thing for those people, especially. Um, but there's other ways of helping people, like helping people with dealing with the society right now, and all the misinformation and not knowing which end is up, or or what is true information and what's not, what is misinformation, what is disinformation, actually put there to distract us from the truth, even though the people that are distracting us from the truth don't necessarily know they're distracting us from the truth, but they don't know where else to turn, and they're determining that, it's a good thing to, start a fire in a warehouse or something, uh, um, which, it was interesting that, I was dealing with hearing people talk about that, and and thinking that it was going to be manifest, either through them or through others, because thoughts are contagious, and even the negative thoughts are contagious. Because if somebody's having a real hard time with something, and they get the idea of doing some violence to somebody else or somebody else's body or vehicles or car or dwelling or whatever it is, or corporation or whatever, and they let those thoughts be justified in their minds by having them and not getting rid of them, by not treating them as a demon, even though you don't have to think of it as a demon. You can just think of it as a negative thought that you just don't want to have in your head because you don't like it. You wouldn't want somebody else to have that in their heads about you. And just because you've judged somebody to be doing something wrong to society or whatever, doesn't mean that you are becoming some kind of a hero by facilitating the elimination of that person. Because we are not capable of judging other people in that way to stop their experience, even though it is right to stop them from harming others. When it becomes something that we have the capacity to do, and some of that capacity might be sharing information with others, so that other people can wake up also to providing the mind, that would be next level mind, that can then influence people to make changes in the government, or even change the government, so that, that could even be a bloodless coup of military leaders saying, we're not supporting these wars. Which is kind of crazy, right? But see, we don't know why exactly those military leaders were saying that to Trump. But apparently, at least two generals in charge of the Air Force and the ships in the Gulf region and the Mediterranean region, and whatever that region is that's considered to be their assignment for the conflicts that are happening there, have just told Trump that they're not doing it. So that, in some ways would be considered to be like a coup d'etat if you're not going to do what the president says. And Congress should be having this talked about. But they're not. And they don't like to talk about these things. That's why they didn't talk about Libya, and they didn't talk about, but they did vote for Afghanistan and Iraq to do that action. And that's why it included boots on the ground, kind of the way they say it. and which to me was a big mistake. Didn't have to be handled that way. There's always a better way to handle it, and it doesn't necessitate having a military to then force people. But then there can be positives that come out of it when people see what's happening and they recognize that behavior as behavior that they don't want to support. And that causes people to be separating from their humanness when they no longer see the ones that were described as the ultimate leaders that had the most money and the most power and the most influence on even good things that were happening. When they start to see that they're not good things anymore, and they come away from that thinking, and they stay away from that thinking, they no longer support those that are supporting that thinking to some degree without crippling themselves in life, because we can take that to an extreme, I believe, too. People have, and I'm not saying that's a bad action, but there's people that have refused to pay any taxes. And they have to kind of go underground because, how do you not pay sales taxes, right? On like toiletries and things. And you see, but there's extremes to all that. And we pick and choose what's going to be an extreme and what's not. And that's perfectly within our rights. And we live with the difficulties. Like it was even talked about 2,000 years ago by Jesus, and he said when they were trying to catch him by saying, your disciples, are they paying taxes? And he said that those that are using the money system, that, are the ones that should pay the taxes for the use of that money system. And of course, if you're getting benefits from some of those taxes, then yes, we should pay taxes. But of course, it's become a system that is so embroiled in cronyism. But even in cronyism, there's highways get built that can be useful to all of us. And I can go on with that. We can get into all kinds of extremes, and people think that I'm into an extreme by believing in tea and dough, of course. So tea and dough brought a crew of students with them that they had worked with those minds before in previous missions for a stage of metamorphic transition from membership in the human kingdom to membership in the physical evolutionary level above human. What the history books call the kingdom of God or the kingdom of heaven. And Doe felt like it seemed that they arrived on Earth, in Earth's atmosphere, between Earth's 1940s and the early 1990s. And that he and T suspected that many of us arrived in staged spacecraft UFO crashes. And many of our discarded bodies were genderless and not belonging to the human species, were retrieved by human authorities, government and military. And that other crews from the next level above human preceded their arrival and placed a deposit, a chip, in each of their vehicles, their bodies. the bodies that were chosen to be taken over, incarnated into. The way that a software program takes over a computer system and runs it. Even though the computer system itself doesn't necessarily know where the source is coming from, except by the addresses, I guess, of the instructions, the way that's developed in the biological computer systems, through hormones and pheromones and everything else. So Doe felt that that while he and T and the other members of the crew were out of body, which was between the arrival and the incarnation, that they were thoroughly briefed and were taken through an extensive preview of places and events that would assist their individual incarnation process of bringing their minds into their consciousness, into the vehicle, into the body, and overriding the mind of the human plant, the container, that each of them was to use. This incarnation process is very difficult and cannot be done without the help of older members, Doe said. Talked about. I heard him talking about all this. So I'm not, I'm not like making it up. So the incarnation process is very difficult, and it cannot be done without the help of older members of the evolutionary level above human who have not only gone through the metamorphic transition to completion themselves, but who have also assisted others through this transition before, acting as midwives for some in the shedding of their human creature characteristics, while preparing to be born as new creatures into the next evolutionary kingdom. It's the human creature characteristics that were being shed. Gender consciousness, sexual consciousness, are human characteristics. Racial consciousness is a human characteristic. Thinking of yourself as already a higher being above human, that would be a human characteristic influenced by the space alien minds. That influenced many humans, and there's many discarnates that think very highly of themselves, and you can see them in vehicles right now in the human kingdom, acting through those vehicles, giving those vehicles the confidence and certain talents, certain skills, certain abilities, certain perceptions that can all be distractions of building ourselves into ultimate, in quotes, gods. In other words, we've got the source. We are the higher source, is what some people begin to believe. The I am movement, you can look it up in the Wikipedia, the I am, I space AM, I am. I put it in short. I summarize it as that even using scripture, the record books, because the scripture is a religious word that I shouldn't be using anymore because it's misleading. Some people, when they hear that word, they think, oh, is that made up material? When you put it in the most accurate way of describing it as record books, then that program doesn't have as much of a chance of coming into their minds to disqualify all of it as worthless. So that gives somebody a greater opportunity to see it more realistically, actually, instead of through religious eyes or spiritual eyes. That is distorted. That is distorted. But it's not distorted entirely. And that's what some people tend to think about that material. That it's all distorted, all a plot to take over humans, and yet it's got both those characteristics of being distorted and being part of a plot of other humans to take over humans as slaves. And you can see that happening through the religions. That's why the religions become killers of souls. Doesn't mean that the soul is not a living entity that's growing, potentially in every human vehicle. We don't know who's got one growing in them or not. It doesn't matter how we think about it, whether they have it or not. What matters is what the next level thinks about it and what we grow our soul with. We can grow our soul with trash, which isn't really growing the soul, it's actually diseasing the soul. And it's going to self-destruct and become no longer capable of becoming a metamorphic. It goes through a reverse metamorphosis, actually, which is what happened in the record books to the individual Adam. So Adam is the first original sin by not being satisfied with doing a task for his older member. An older member that he already knew was his older member. But now that he was in the environment where the space alien souls were circulating and their minds were there thinking of themselves as the gods, operating through whatever humans were there before Adam, because there were, even in the record books, indications that there were humans before Adam and then Eve. So they were tricked. He was tricked. And because of that trick, it took 7 generations, according to those records. I don't know if those records are accurate in that part, but it illustrates the process of being a soul that gets tricked into going with the ideas from a different direction than their older member. Regardless of how it came to that individual made the choice to go with that idea, showing that he had that weakness that is part of the reason why the next level even started this experiment, to expose members of the next level that were also of equivalent growth with those that chose to go against the next level. Before they chose to go against the next level, there were individuals working in an elementary capacity as extraterrestrials, because they weren't limited to one terrestrial surface anymore, because there were members on spacecrafts that didn't have a terrestrial origin anymore, because they already graduated from their previous terrestrial organizational structures on some other planet in some other solar system, on some other star system, whatever it was, wherever it was, that were brought here in order to go through the experience of getting rid of that part of the mind that would then rebel against their older members' instructions. When the older members aren't giving instructions to control people, they're giving instructions so that they can continue on with helping some souls grow to become members of their environment. That's their birth process. Who want to be there, who want to go through that process, who want to give service to those that created them, which they have some degree of recognition of and appreciation for. Appreciation of life. And that means also appreciation of all the life forms. And, using in a good way all those life forms. And not misusing those life forms or abusing those life forms. I don't know what abuse of the mineral kingdom, if you want to call it a kingdom, it's not really a kingdom, unless you think of the most powerful minerals being like, the top of that kingdom, because they can, like, I imagine the really highly radioactive particles are among the most potent in some ways. But I don't know, maybe certain gemstones, crystals and things have a certain amount of status in a kind of a hierarchy of mineral kingdom, that the periodic table kind of documents, right? So that's why, they're not kingdoms in terms of, having one that's better than the other. It's better for what? I mean, for bacteria certainly is better when it's digesting fecal matter, converting it into topsoil that can then be used to grow really good food for the creatures and for the human creatures as well. So they're not lesser in terms of their own function, but they're lesser in the sense that their service can have many different forms. That can also affect millions of people by our thoughts. If our thoughts are of service to goodness and not trying to put people down and treat people badly or abuse people or, encourage people to donate their babies, or their bodies to science, even encouraging euthanasia, to get people off the docket of having to be paid every month for their lives, which is happening in Canada, I believe, and I don't know if it'll be introduced here or not. Not only saying, we'll give somebody else a bunch of money if you decide to leave by your own volition. That's being talked about in parliaments in Canada and other places. Bills are provided for that, to expand the euthanasia. They don't want to talk about this kind of thing too much. But neither the space alien souls nor humans in high places want to see this many bodies using the resources. And so if they can find ways of generating the reduction of the use of resources, like the World Economic Forum was talking about many years ago, and they had that date of 2030, maybe that is going to be a date of some sort, to where they want humans to live in their houses. I'll talk about that a little later if I continue to have the energy to do more of the stream. But I'm realizing that it wasn't an accident that I'm talking about these things that Doe talked about without just, willy-nilly talking about what, comes to me in the news and things. That's good. Probably even better than even talking about the audio tapes. Because there's a lot of, the depth of understanding of what they were all about. T and Doe and crew, student bodies, including my experience with that for 19 years, is in those audio tapes. There's over 1,000 of them, and so it's not a mystery why some of them are still being held back from us by the very ones that are managing the Heaven's Gate website. They don't want me talking about it. Because they're afraid that they're going to be seen as promoting the S word. When all they would have to do is, to everybody that claimed that about them, tell them that our position is against the S word and point to the document that's on the screen there, that humans that have lessons to learn, which we all are and we all do, or we wouldn't be here still, need these bodies in order to have lessons. So all you have to do is talk about that every time, and they'd still be sharing what T and Doe actually thought, and that those that left had graduated enough out of their humanness, evidenced by those tapes. That's the evidence of how each student, what they had to deal with, because like I started to talk about very early in the stream, was that you'd be with somebody as a partner that you didn't necessarily want to hang around. And you certainly didn't want to ask their opinion about whether you were following procedures or not, because you certainly would have thought, well, I can do it myself. Why should I ask somebody else to point out things in myself that need to be changed? We have programming that doesn't want to hear what somebody else thinks about what we need to change. And so right away you had a circumstance where you were with somebody that you didn't necessarily want to be with unless you wanted to be in the program. And then you had to repeat that over days and weeks and months and years, while T and Doe were bringing us greater and greater challenges in that regard, by even saying that even the expression on your face, you've got to control so that nobody else knows that you're going through hell. And so if you couldn't do that, because it was just oozing out of you because of disharmony that you were having with your partner, or in your own mind with your choices, or you're thinking about somebody in the world that you wanted to be with, those things were just forced to the surface, to where something would happen, there would be a trigger, and all of a sudden that person would be saying to T and Doe, or they would just leave in the middle of the night, not even tell T and Doe about it. And the only thing that T and O didn't like about that was that, well, they would have to move because that person might become an avenue for the ones that were sending out investigators to try to pull somebody out of the group would be able to find them better, so they didn't like it for that reason. And they also hoped that the person wasn't going to go against them. Not for their sake, even though that too, they didn't want somebody saying things about them that, even though they weren't doing anything illegal or doing anything morally against anybody, but they just claimed that they were, saying and teaching them to not depend on their own opinions, to not go by their own minds anymore, but to use only their older member's mind. That was manipulative, and they were afraid for them, and so they could have authorities come down on them and stop that process of happening with all the individuals that did recognize the value of limiting their own, of questioning their own opinions and ideas, to see what older members would think about those opinions and ideas, instead of trusting that they had the best opinions and ideas about any subject. And so that was a major lesson step for quite a few people, to say ahead of making a statement, a fact, I could be wrong, but I think the sky is blue, when the older members told you it was purple. I mean, that's not an example that was used. I gave the examples that were used, and I don't want to go through them again. But you can search my blog for the word leisure port. Leisure, like relaxing by living a life of leisure. Port, P-O-R-T, like the left side of the ship, or the porthole of a ship. So search for those words on my blog, sawyerhg.wordpress.com, and you can see the origin of the I could be wrong description. Oops. If that's Kathy, I'm going to be ending the stream. Oh, 45 minutes. That's good to hear. Wow, it's already 8:39. But I don't think either one of us has to get up early in the morning. Too early. Anyway, so it was hard to stay in the classroom. It was hard to stay in the classroom. It was hard, and we didn't know it was hard. I didn't know it was hard. I didn't think it was that hard. There were certain things that I just didn't have to overcome. But there were other things that I didn't even know I was still overcoming, even in the very end, before I left the class. And it wasn't just the reasons that, I gave into sensuality. That wasn't even, that was part of an instrument of it, but there were certain things that I wasn't learning, and I can prove that. And that is talked about also in Sawyer's story at sawyerhg.wordpress.com in great detail. I can't do it at liberty now because I'm almost out of energy. Although I could eat something and get some more energy. So talks about the true kingdom of God, the real physical kingdom of heaven, the evolutionary level above human are completely synonymous terms, phrases. As a genderless kingdom, it reproduces or adds to its kingdom membership through the use of this metamorphic process of changing from one creature to another that can even be done without dying. Enough to where the next level will give that individual a final ingredient that to complete their metamorphosis that will make the vehicle into a certain strata of next level vehicle. Because the mind developed to take it through that birth canal. Those illustrations are correct. It is a mind birth, the way that the term was used in the record books as a spirit birth. That doesn't tell you enough about it, because we don't really understand the word spirit, what it really means, until T and O came. We're understanding it to degrees, people are, even before T and O came, to use that term as an equivalent. The science of mind has been around for a long time, and there's a value to that thinking. But there's many people that still don't recognize that there's a science to the mind. It's frequency-based. It actually can make things happen. It can generate health in the vehicle. Unless the vehicle has something that also requires certain fasting or even potentially an operation to fix. Because sometimes the vehicle gets so broken down in a certain area that there's no usually like natural substances that can turn it around enough to reverse it or to eliminate the destruction that it's doing. And so an operation could be the best way of dealing with, like, even a tooth infection, for example. So the metamorphic birth into the level above human occurs that in any given civilization on a fertile planet such as Earth, and that the Earth has had many periodic cyclical civilizations on it, the level above human members plant all the new life forms, including humans, for the civilization in a neutral condition so that they have a chance to choose the direction of their growth. The level above human, or the next level, directly, hands-on, relates significantly to the civilization at its beginning stage, and subsequently, with few exceptions, at the approximately 2,000-year intervals, like a 48-hour interval from a next level perspective, until that civilization's final age. Each time that next level relates directly to any portion of that civilization, deposits containing souls, the seed or chip with a program of metamorphic possibilities, are placed in many human plants. This deposit is potentially the gift of life into the physical and real evolutionary level above human. These deposits are given or made only when members of the level above human are assigned to directly relate to, be incarnate in, the civilization. But don't provide an update by saying that even somebody's curiosity in their information and who they are can be a reason for the next level to deposit that chip, that gift of life, into that vehicle. That is a gift of life for the soul. It's not a gift of life for the vehicle. The vehicle already has the gift of life by being a vehicle, being alive and thriving in the human kingdom. So the deposits are given or made only when members of the next level are assigned to directly relate to, be incarnate in, the civilization. Only these representatives can nurture those deposited souls with next level thinking, behavior, and all the information required to effectively fluff off all human mammalian characteristics of the old creature. A potential creature of the next level cannot cling to human ways any more than a butterfly can cling to caterpillar ways. So when a representative from the kingdom is present, that rep's nurturing teachings is a window for exiting the human kingdom for all who have been given deposits and souls. These deposits are made only in vehicles that are old enough, having grown or matured enough for self-determination or responsibility. And this is the last one I'm going to read, I think. I'm not reading, I'm putting it into my own words. Some of this too. So, humans with deposits containing souls can likely be identified at this time as some of those who are rapidly losing respect for this world or its system. They are, from the establishment's point of view, being irresponsible or antisocial, and will be seen by the world as duped, crazy, a cult member, a drifter, a loner, a dropout, a separatist, etc. One more and then I'm done. One more idea. So, not only is the body, in a sense, the temporary container for the soul, But even more importantly, the soul is the housing or container of the new creature. The soul has in its own brain in quotes, the way that's being used by Doe, or hard drive is the way of thinking about the brain, that accumulates only information of the next level, mundane as well as theoretical or philosophical. The soul also becomes part of the new physical body of the new creature, though it is seldom seen by human eyes. Therefore, when a soul is part of a new deposit, it has very little information and is a very small next level fetus. As it develops or grows in size, it necessitates the abortion of the human mind, which is in a container beside it. If you think of a glass vase that has two balloons in it, one balloon is the human mind, the other is the next level mind. When the next level makes a soul deposit, it is like placing the second balloon in the glass vase. So when metamorphosis begins, the human mind, the balloon, the one balloon, is all but filling the container. And the next level mind, or soul, is all but empty. As the next level mind increases and the soul begins to grow larger, the human mind, container, or balloon decreases until, if the next level mind successfully makes it to term, the human deflated balloon is discarded, and the next level balloon with the next level mind is all that fills the container. See, all but decreases. All but is discarded. Doesn't mean that it's gone. But then the next level mind has then become a physical body in a new species, the level above human, needing only a new physical outer shell, which it receives as a quartermaster issue upon physically entering the next level. So on board the spacecrafts, that's when they received their new issue of an outer shell of a body to receive the new mind in that glass vase developed from the human container. So that's all I'm going to go through today. I don't know how long it's going to take for the stream to catch up with my words. So I'm going to go to the chat. I haven't paid attention to the chat hardly at all. Old School Dave, hello. And tune in and tune out. There you go. Yeah, I remember that. I mean, there's a point of value to that, I believe. And Joseph Coates says, I agree with what you said, that humans can't really conceive the human body and mind fully. It's very complex. We can try, but we're imperfect. Yes. Rise Above, hello to you, Rise Above Club. And Old School Dave says, long live the new flesh. There you go. Joseph Coates says, currently struggling to find a job, but I have my second interview for this one job in a couple days. Hope that's a good sign. it's possible, each of us, can potentially have our own relationship with the highest source. And if we look to that highest source, or look to them who represent that highest source for help with even, for a job, and we continue to be doing that asking when we're going through the interview, sure, a second interview can certainly be a good sign. Yeah, absolutely. No question about that. That means you're a contender, right? And, try to, yeah, good luck with that. Old School Dave says good luck to JC as well. And he says thank you. And then Joseph Coates says, there's a recent post on Heaven's Gate Reddit asking why Sawyer still believes in Heaven's Gate. One person commented only Sawyer knows, and how looking for real evidence in a religion compared to a feeling is quite hard. They also asked why some people exited a month or so later after the class did. That same person who answered that comment said, we know next level timing is very different. Old School Dave says, get a snack, buddy. I guess you want me to continue to talk, maybe? That's a good sign. Maybe I will. No, I've got it. Kathy's going to be home soon, and I want to pay attention to what we want to do together. And I feel like I got enough done by talking about the things that Doe was talking about in 1995 that I was pulling from while I was talking before. So I think I'm going to wait. Maybe she's hungry also. So the 90s up until now, says Joseph, might be just a couple minutes. Every 2000 is when the spirit or mind comes back to us, correct? Well, approximately that timing. I don't know what it's going to be for the next experience, but that mind is still with us now. So I wouldn't put it into the past because we have what they talked to us about what was going to happen after they left, and that's in the Heaven's Gate book and the away team document from deep space, surface before departure, that has to do with being willing to stand for T and O's, being from the kingdom that created this planet and the life forms on it, and maintaining that stand, being willing to take that stand and maintaining that stand until we leave, and accepting the consequences of maintaining that stand, and also getting their information out as part of that as well in that document. So I don't want to just say that it's not all in the past. It's happening now. We can still see the Beyond Human series and Doe talking. We can still hear his voice through the audio tapes and hear T's voice through the audio tapes. And we know that's not like a made-up story made up by the government to try to trick us, or made up to, get us to believe in something to give our money to. See, none of those false, or representative thinking only in theoretical forms. That's still not the case. We have the direct information in the book as well, of course, equally so, with all the audio tapes and videotapes of the how and when the Heaven's Gate, the seeking of the evolutionary level above human may be entered. How and when? It's still happening. Until we're recycled, or we don't have access to this information, to me, the doors are still open. And does that mean leaving by our own hand? No, I'm not saying that leaving by our own hand is part of that. We need these vehicles to do the task of sharing their information. with others, getting their information out. There's nobody getting the information out, that many. I mean, maybe there are, but I just don't know about them, and I don't have to know about them. It doesn't make any difference whether I know about it or not. I'm not, I'm trying to do that task, and it's difficult for me to do that task. Old School Dave said, yeah, if you're up to continuing. Thanks, Old School Dave. Yeah, I appreciate you saying that. And P.K. Miller says, just ordered your book, Sawyer. Looking forward to it. Oh, great, great. I'm glad that you ordered it. I hope I've responded to you ordering it. Unless you did it literally just now, then I wouldn't have gotten that email yet. I just sent one to Madison, Wisconsin. It was the last person I sent a book to, but that was about a week ago. Have a wonderful evening, buddy. Says, thank you for the time, says Old School Dave. You're welcome. I'm going to take that to, I caught up with the chat, I think, okay, and so I'm going to wind down and look forward to the next stream. Good night, folks.